All right, well, on behalf of Arlington Economic Development, thank you for joining today's HR Strategies Post-COVID-19 webinar. This is the latest webinar in Arlington Economic Development's COVID-19 webinar series. My name is Connor Courtney. I'm a Strategic Initiatives Manager with Arlington Economic Development's Business Investment Group. My colleague Adam Henry and I put together this moderated panel discussion focusing on trending HR issues that we're facing currently as well as in the future. Our moderator is Kim Fischer of Kim Fischer Werner Consulting. Our panelists are Greg Kilstrom, CEO of CareerGig. CareerGig is a freelance marketplace that connects employers with top-tier talent while providing freelancers with benefits. We have Ximena Hartsock, founder of Phone to Action. Phone to Action is an advocacy software for grassroots marketing campaigns. And we have Chelsea Libra, Human Resources Manager at Excella. Excella is a software and technology consulting company located here in Arlington. I figured I'd do the introductions, but then turn it over to Kim to moderate the discussion, which will have approximately 35 to 40 minutes. Feel free to post your questions in the chat. We will either answer them in the chat, you may bring them up during the conversation, or we will do a broader Q&A session at the end. So I will turn it over to you, Kim, and get the conversation started.
All right, thank you to everyone for joining us today. And we are going to jump right in with our first topic, which is in the area of communications. And with our first question, which is in looking at timelines in terms of conversations with employees and the cadence of returning to work, we want to have Ximena respond to that question, which is the importance of being transparent and communicating regularly with staff, both staff working on site and remote, in terms of communication in that area. So Ximena, can you talk to us about that? Ximena, I think you're on mute still.
Sorry about that. Yeah, but thanks for having me and everyone for joining. I found this question, very important one, because I think anything that has to do with reopening now, or anything that we do, have to consider how we're talking to our team members. And I don't think that's just the responsibility of the chair manager or the manager. I think it does come from the leadership. So the first, answer really to your question is that my co-founder and I have always been very close to the idea of talking to the employees at all times. So it's not just the regular meetings that we have, which I'm going to mention in a few, but it's also about the team being open and feeling that it's okay for them to text us or to send us a Slack, a DM, or anything like that. So most people in the company have my cell phone number, and they call me or they text me when there is a situation. And normally that's what, in cases like this with the pandemic, you're never ready for something like this. But if there is any recommendation I can give, even though we have about 85 employees here and a few more remote, just keeping the communication open as part of the culture is extremely helpful in situations like this where there is a lot of uncertainty. So with that said, in terms of cadence to communication, so we, like most of you, we use Slack as a communication channel for all, but we created a few more channels that connect, what's happening in Jira on the engineering side, and Intercom from the customer side. So those are the Intercom is the chat system that customers use to tell us when they have an issue with the platform. And Jira is, the engineering we use it for more than engineering, but it's the system that we use for ticketing. And so in the past, we will have in-person meetings every week, and now what we're doing is we created a channel to kind of pull those communications together, so people know when there is an issue with the platform and who is answering that. And for reopening, we created a second channel that is specifically done when people that are gonna be working on an issue, they're having a scheduling problem, which in the past we didn't need to do that. We have also a couple of channels for coming to the office. So people having a schedule to come to the office, and people volunteer to come, and so we to kind of all be informed. Sometimes moms especially decide to come on a different day. We have the channel open for that. And we have 2 more meetings. We used to have our Friday typical all staff meeting, but we also have now pop-up lunches that people are using to ask questions about reopening or about anything that they want to ask about. And they have office hours, especially with the HR manager for that matter.
Great. And Greg, with CareerGig, what have you found works for you in terms of transparency and communicating with your team?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, great to be on this panel, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing comes down to really trying to understand what the concerns might be, and then finding the best tools for the job, so to speak. So, we're CareerGig, we're a startup. So we started in May of this last year, so small team. We are a 100% remote team as well. So started in the era of COVID, and we're one of those companies that's probably never going to have a physical office presence. We just kind of made that decision, but it's still really important that we communicate and make sure that everybody's staying safe, and we're all going to have in-person meetings and do all sorts of things. So, to make sure that everyone's taking necessary precautions. So, I think with anything, this really comes back to whether we're in a time of crisis or not. It's understanding communication preferences, it's understanding concerns of the employees, and then trying to manage that gap of if there are real legitimate concerns that we can do something about, let's create a plan to mitigate those. If there's still unknowns, which I would say as of today, we're still in a bit of an unknown, definitely interested in talking about post-COVID, but we're still kind of in the thick of it as well. So we're still feeling our way as we go a bit. So, just trying to mitigate some of those concerns with just clear messaging. And sometimes it comes down to individual communications. I mean, certain people have different needs. I realize that that's easy for me to say in a 20-person company versus a 20,000 person company, but still personalizing things to individual needs can be done at scale, even in a very large organization.
Okay, great. And Chelsea, what have you found with Ximena?
Yeah, so again, I'm going to echo everyone else. I'm excited to be here and part of this conversation. So Ximena, we are just under 300 employees, so a little bit larger than the 20 person. And so we've had to take a tiered scale approach where we've really empowered our managers and leaders to have those conversations with employees. We've implemented town halls and one-on-one conversations with leaders, office hours, all of that to make sure that there's transparency. And I think it does go back to, it's going to be different for every single employee. And so understanding that and what the employees want. So early, actually, before we even went remote, we've started a coronavirus response team, which is a group of employees from different areas of the organization. And so they serve as messengers and liaisons. So as a group, we come together and share, this is the pulse of what's happening, or this is the concern employees have. And as a group, we discuss what's the best approach to make sure employees are getting the information that they need. Another thing we implemented was well-being surveys, where we ask every so often in those surveys, how is the communication going? And we've even gone as far as entering in some of those well-being pandemic questions into our engagement survey that we just ran. So we have a continuous pulse on what the employees are feeling and if they're comfortable with what we're sharing, or if they're wanting more or less, and how do we adjust for that.
So that leads me into the next question I was going to bring up, which is best practices around communications. Would you say those are some of your best practices, Chelsea?
I think we've learned that it is working to be a best practice. Historically, if I'm being honest, I think communication has always been kind of something that employees want more of. There's always like that carrot dangling in front of you, right? And so we really tried to get out ahead of it before employees had the questions. We were trying to address those questions, recognizing that we're employees too. And so if we have some of these questions, instead of just talking amongst ourselves, let's share it and create more of a group conversation around it. So we've established best practices definitely in making sure we are reaching out to our employee base more frequently to inform our decisions.
Okay. And it sounds like from some of those teams that you've formed too, they are definitely getting you some of that information so that you can kind of stay out in front of it.
Absolutely, because each of those team members bring a different perspective. So some have been remote, some were on client sites and having to manage, well, what does the client want versus what is Xcela's return to work? And so having all of these different perspectives really helps us think through different lenses.
And just one question about some of those teams. Do you change any of the team members periodically just to get different perspectives, or have they kind of stayed the same as far as team membership?
They've stayed the same for the most part. So we're what, 7 months, 8 months into this, so they've stayed the same. But also, if someone's out, they'll tag another representative in if they're on vacation or something like that. So it's still an open forum. We have a Slack channel as well where conversation is occurring with the coronavirus response team that other employees can access and check in on as well.
And one more quick question about your teams. Were they voluntary? Did they volunteer to be on the team, or were they selected by their supervisors or managers?
Yes, they were selected by their leadership team member as a good representative for that area.
Okay, great. And so just kind of going back around, Greg, what would you say are some best practices around communications that you've used or felt have been best practices for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on a few of those, just trying to personalize the message, and but also I think somebody else touched on this as well, but just frequency of updates. So sometimes it's I would say as leaders we try to wait until there's a substantive update, and sometimes are keeping people kind of waiting for information. I've found it's easier to just kind of come out and say, this is what we know, and we said we were going to get you XYZ by this date, but we still don't have it yet, but here's an update anyway, instead of just there being zero update and everyone thinking either the ball got dropped or is it better or worse, just sort of the ambiguity. I think just setting a deadline for ourselves, in other words, to even give communications helps, and at least alleviates the if there is an unknown, it's at least the unknown is known, so to say.
Acknowledging that you're still working on it. Yeah. Okay. Ximena, I saw you shaking your head to that too. Have you found that's kind of some of what you found too around some of your best practices, or have you found other areas?
So I think employees always know when folks, managers, HR, their leaders are being genuine and transparent and open. They know it's part of the culture. And this is a good opportunity for any HR leaders right now that are listening that have had pushback in the past from leaders about anything that you suggest that improves the communications, this is a time to remind them how important it is to have this in an ongoing basis, because in a situation like this, like we're in this year, those can be very handy and shouldn't be, communication shouldn't be better now because of the situation where we're in. It's just because the communications that we have are so great, what we're going through is not difficult. That should be the story that we're all telling, and that should the reality that we're all facing. So I think in our case, you know, I was the ideator and the founder of the company, and I do have a co-founder as well who's still with us. We were 3 in the beginning. One of them is now has another startup, but as the founder, you know, I kind of, it was my baby. So in a way, you know, we built the company with a lot of these processes of it was nothing created just to check a box. It was all really coming from building a company, 1, 2, 3, 4, then 5 people, then 10. It's like you build a family, and it scaled and it grew because we had those principles. So practices, I mean, gotta tell your staff what's going on. They will know, and it's better that they know it from you. Like Greg just said, better to over inform than under, and then people will lose the trust. Number 2, not every channel of communication works the same. So Slack can get really noisy and crowded, and sometimes a text message, a WhatsApp message. I use WhatsApp a lot because we have a very lots of workers from other countries, and you know, WhatsApp is very popular in most of the world, so we use a lot of WhatsApp, and anything like a phone call. Like at the end of the day, you know, you want to make sure that people are getting the information in the fastest way possible. And the practice is like having a Friday meeting or every 2-week meeting that has an agenda that is structured. So every time that you meet with them, that is an opportunity to share new information, or a town hall setting where people have the opportunity to raise their hand and ask questions. I'm not a fan of meetings where the staff is not able to talk or chat on the channel. And in some, I've been to meetings, webinar is different, but I've been to meetings where they cannot do that, or they are moderated. I just don't think it's a good practice. The more the staff can talk, the happier they're going to be, and the more they're going to be receptive to any change. So in general, it's just like you will run your family in a way, to me, run a company, and especially during times like this.
Okay. And so Greg, I know most of your staff, you said, is remote regularly, but in terms of communicating with staff about plans to return to the workplace, and maybe, I think, Chelsea, you mentioned that you do have some staff that are working currently on site with clients. What are the feelings that you are getting back from staff about returning to working on site? And what are those communications looking like? And just whoever would like to jump in, I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, Chelsea, if you want to take that one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So all of our staff is currently remote, and we have been very fortunate that all of the roles, more seamlessly than we even anticipated, transferred to remote or a virtual position. And so all of our clients at this time are also still working remote. However, some of the clients that we work with have been discussing return to work plans. And I think it is in the midst of everything. You know, if we think back to March, people were like, well, maybe we'll return in June and then September. And so it's this very flexible mentality that we're having, which is why, going back to the communication, it's so important employees are communicating any questions they have or concerns they have. And as a leadership and firm, we're providing those channels for employees to do so. So our engagement leaders who run the accounts on the client sites, they've been having regular conversations in their account meetings with their teams, communicating out, hey, this is what it's looking like. If you have concerns, please talk to me, please talk to HR. We created a template for employees to complete if there was any sort of medical concerns that they needed an accommodation, if it was just a personal concern, maybe they live with someone who's at high risk. So we wanted just to make sure we engaged in that conversation early with employees so they felt supported by Ximena, and they weren't running up to the point where they were being told to return to work and, panicked or found another job. We wanted to make sure employees knew we were on their side and we wanted to work with them, and we'd advocate for the flexibility that they needed.
Right.
Yeah, one thing I'll add there, I mean, so not so much with our own employees, but our customers. So CareerGig, we're a platform that connects contractors and freelance workers with opportunities. And so our end customers are increasingly hiring remote contractors and freelancers as opposed to on-site opportunities, and really just kind of opening up their minds, I guess, so to speak, to this idea that someone doesn't necessarily have to be in in the office. And I think so much behavior was changed when the pandemic hit, and because it's lasted for so long, those initial sort of misgivings or just sort of not knowing what to do about it, habits have been formed. I mean, it's been long enough that I think we're, as humans, we form habits after a certain amount of time and days and iterations and stuff like that. And so we're finding a lot of our end customers are just opening up their their horizons, so to speak, to a broader workforce and all over the country. And I mean, I think that provides a lot of benefits to whether it's more diverse hires or the cost of living can be considerably less if you're living outside of urban areas and stuff like that. So I think it opens up a lot of opportunities. So yeah, it's been an interesting shift.
So
I know go ahead.
Very quick addition. So there is a software called Growwork. It's Grow, GRWRK. And Growwork is a software that you can use, actually startup, that can help you fill all of the needs of your employees remotely. So they can pick their any materials that they need, any supplies that they need, and it's technology. So the founder actually has a visualization company for real estate where he helps real estate agencies stage homes. So it's almost like the same technology. They use VR for the real estate company. I don't know if he uses VR for Growwork, but it's growing dramatically and it's very helpful. In our case, we're exploring the service, but we don't have that many remote workers. Most of our staff comes to the office. But we chip their computers, everything that they need. We chip them in little bags, like we probably all of you do, with some goodies, welcome goodies. During about a couple of weeks ago, we also chipped everyone and the new remote workers extra t-shirts for elections. So that's the vote t-shirt and all kinds of other things that they can use masks to go out and vote. But the remote onboarding hasn't been difficult at all because we have so many technology, so many tools now that we can use for remote. I think what it makes it a little bit more challenging is the interaction. So we add to the onboarding a happy hour. We did there's actually a couple of companies that do happy hours that you can send the kid home, and then they do a bartending session. That is a bartender that comes online. And it's super cute and cool. So those are some things that are working for us.
So Ximena, you actually moved us into our next topic, which is interviews and onboarding, and the challenges of onboarding new employees remotely. But that is kind of a nice segue. And so kind of talking about shipping computers or laptops and different things to employees. Greg, if you wanted to start us out on that, can you talk to us a little bit about any challenges you might have? But it sounds like with your staff, you probably do this fairly regularly too. So you might have some best practices that you use too with onboarding remotely.
Yeah, I mean, so with my last company, I sold a marketing agency a few years back. Everything was in person, you know, in real life and all that. So this was definitely a learning experience for me, just starting out, you know, with 100% remote onboarding. And so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot different to well, I mean, from a computer standpoint and all that, you know, we can order stuff and just get it shipped directly. Where our IT infrastructure isn't so specific and exact that we have to have somebody install apps and stuff like that beforehand. But certainly that could be automated as well. But I think there is definitely a big difference in that feeling of when you walk into an office for the first time and you get to meet the people you're going to be working with. And so, you know, to try to recreate that. I think what I've found is that trying to simply substitute in person with Zoom meetings doesn't work as well as it might seem. I think, you know, just from slight tangent, but the Zoom fatigue phenomenon that we're all feeling is because everyone all of a sudden, okay, well, we couldn't be in a conference room together, so let's all, you know, get on Zoom, you know, 24/7. I think the same thing goes with onboarding. What I've done, instead of having group meetings and stuff, like basically inundating a new person with a bunch of new faces and names that they're probably not going to remember an hour later, encouraging one-on-one meetings. So, you know, it takes longer. I mean, onboarding, you know, might have taken 1 or 2 days to meet everybody and kind of get to know everybody. It might take 1 or 2 weeks to really make the rounds and get to know everyone and build a little rapport. But it's so much deeper and so much more meaningful because they're able to connect in their own way and all that stuff, instead of, again, trying to recreate what we did, you know, 6 months ago or 9 months ago, I guess at this point, in an exact, like, apples to apples way.
Do you happen to, you know, match them up with a coworker who is kind of a guide for them, or somebody that can answer questions or anything like that during their onboarding period?
Yeah, we always try to do that, and I've always done that, you know, in the more, you know, the offline world as well. But yeah, it's helpful to have a buddy, so to speak, that can do that and answer questions. And you know, we use we use Slack and you know, a lot of channels that are more, you know, either real time or asynchronous or whatever, but still it's nice to have someone that you can, you know, reach out to. And you know, I think I'm fortunate enough, our leadership team is very open and transparent, and you know, we try to keep the virtual door open, so to speak, as much as possible as well. But yeah, I think the sort of the buddy system works pretty well.
Yeah. And Chelsea, how about for you with onboarding? Any challenges and anything around benefits, as far as communicating like benefit packages and consistency and those types of areas?
Yeah, you know, I almost think it was more of an opportunity than a challenge. It really allowed us to identify where we could streamline our process, like where there was too much fluff, if you will. And so we've been able to get more detailed and created more resources for employees. So they were there for new hires, but also existing employees. So our approach to the virtual onboarding is we have the departments come in virtually to the onboarding orientation and give their speech on, you know, what the IT department does and sets up their laptop. Excel is a little bit unique. We have a bring your own laptop policy. So we subsidize the cost of a laptop so employees can buy the laptop that they want. So from a shipping perspective, we haven't really had much of a challenge there since this was already implemented and has been a benefit that employees really enjoy. But yeah, I think it's been good. It hasn't, you know, as Greg mentioned, it's not apples to apples, but we are adjusting and evolving and finding where this is going to continue to evolve and kind of better our orientation and onboarding process.
Quick question about that laptop. Are there certain guidelines around it? Does it have to have like certain specific?
Yeah, we do have certain specifics, such as like security systems, and you have to buy certain packages with the laptops to make sure it's up to standards and, you know, have all the firewalls and everything implemented. But for the most part, like it can be any brand. We have a mix, I would almost say 50-50 of PC versus Mac users, which is just nice for employees to be able to use the flavor of laptop that they want. So.
And do they have to sign off on any sort of agreement in terms with your subsidy in terms of being on board for a certain period of time?
Yeah, so the subsidy, it's a 2-year program. So every 2 years you can elect to get a new laptop. And if you leave within that 2 years, you just pay the difference of the subsidy. So Ximena would still be paying for part of it up until you leave if you don't stay for the entire 2 years.
Okay. Kind of my geeky HR side on some of those details, just for anybody who is out there. So, Ximena, in terms of interviewing for candidates for your team, how have you changed maybe your perspective in screening and interviewing for candidates for high demand positions in your business or just in general, given the pandemic? Have you seen any changes?
Well, I think Greg mentioned this a little bit. It's just, I think the biggest piece is to actually see the person in person, right? And so we are actually conducting some interviews at the office because we reopened in August. We reopened in a phased manner. So, you know, folks are volunteered to come, but they signed up. There is a sign up list. We went through a very meticulous process to you know, address all of the social distance and sanitation needs for the office. So we had it ready to open late August, and there are some folks that come twice a week, and there are management meetings that occur at the office, and that the office manager comes every day. The head of HR comes, you know, 2 or 3 times a week. So there is a constant flow. So we use that opportunity for the in-person interviews that we need to have, because we feel that you don't really get that virtually as well as you can do in person, like the, you know, eye contact and some of the social clues. But besides that, you know, the same process as before hasn't changed. You know, a lot of back channeling, interview references, and lots of interviews. My husband actually worked for Cisco Systems. He's an engineer, and he changed jobs during the pandemic, and I saw that was very interesting. The process for him was all virtual, and he's still working virtually. And for a company like that, Cisco, you know, is a multi, you know, I don't know, there are hundreds of thousands of employees all over the world, and he moved to a startup of 65. And so, and I saw that the process was not much different between the two of them and what we were doing. I think generally everyone is trying to keep the conversations fluid. One thing that I noticed that it is taking a little longer, I think, a little longer, because you do have to kind of coordinate schedules now, and all the calendars are full with Zoom meetings, and it's easier when you're at the office to pull everybody inside of a room, and here now you have to coordinate, so it does take a little longer. But besides that, all of the, if you have a great candidate, all of the selling of, you know, this is a great company, you know, it is the same. Again, the challenge of not being doing in person, you have to compensate with lots of other interesting things, like chipping them something cool, chipping them swag, like I mentioned before, and all of these other events like mixology events. You can do those also for candidates, but we're doing those for customers too, because they're really cool to kind of have a bartending session when you send them a kit. But all of those things added to the process, and I think getting someone hire is a dating almost experience. Like you're recruiting someone you really like, and getting them to sign up, you know, with us, you know, it takes everything. So we use as many creative tools as we can.
So just kind of going back to your doing some interviewing on site. You said you started doing some of that back in August. Have you had any candidates express any concern, even with the measures that you've taken, who have maybe not wanted to, and how have you handled that?
I don't think candidates are concerned. The only thing is that a lot of our candidates are not local, so that's not possible to do because they can't travel. But our experience has been that having the office open as an option for anything has been great. For anything that people want to use it for, whether it is that they want to come and team members do a meeting on their own, or they want to use it as a meeting point to do something else. We have a lot of young people without family, with us, they're single, so they have a little bit more of a fluid schedule, and sometimes, being at home becomes really tiring. So having it there available for them to come. And for candidates, I think candidates also want to see whether maybe working from, so seeing in person. I think we've been enough months in the pandemic for folks to generally know what are the signs that companies have, hands down, and the steps to be safe. So they know that they know what to look for: social distance and hand washing, sanitizing, mask wearing, all of that stuff. And I think very quickly a person walking into a building can see that, and they can turn around if they don't like it. And our building is safe from the get-go. So far, no issues.
And the temperature checks and all of those things.
All of that. I mean, we have so much. We spend so much time on that. There's one-way traffic. There's actually an article in the Washington Business Journal with pictures of our office. It's one-way traffic. It's a temperature station. Our head of HR, our head office manager are, on top of this day in and day out. So yeah.
Great.
And not all of this, the changes in meeting rooms, like, capacity signs outside, right. Meetings that were 25, now they're 4 or 5. So all of those signal to anyone that comes in that we're serious about social distance. We separated the desks. So there's so many rules inside that people, as soon as they see, I think they also are impressed with that, and they like to.
All right. So Greg, you said that you have seen a jump in the number of employers who are looking at different ways to bring on staff. So you must see a jump in interviewing. How has that changed for you, or have you seen any major changes in how you are interviewing staff?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. For our end customers, they're bringing on a lot of, a lot of companies have been through furloughs and layoffs and all of those kinds of things. And the way that they're scaling their workforce back up, it definitely depends on the organization. But what we're seeing, and one of the premises of us starting the company even, was that a lot of these companies are actually bringing on 1099 contractors and freelancers to fill roles that might have previously been filled by W-2s. And so what we're seeing there is, so the downside of this is, I don't think companies are taking as much care in a lot of cases to interview 1099s, these shorter term workers, as they do full-time employees. And yet it's just as critical. In some cases, it's even more critical. Someone needs to be able to be onboarded and up to speed even more quickly if the duration of their employment is only going to be a few weeks to a few months. And so, my company does a lot in that regard to help speed the vetting and verification processes up and everything like that. But I think in general, that shift in, an increase in contractors mixed with this increase in remote screening and interviewing, I think it's, you could say it's a perfect storm for hasty decisions or poor decisions to be made, unless you really take a lot of care and effort to, to do in depth and to really take the time. Again, it's not going to look like it did in person and, a year ago how things were done, but you need to find ways to get as thorough and in-depth remotely, or in the case where it's safe and secure to bring people into an on-site location, that's that's certainly good, but that's not always the case. And a lot of organizations, even large ones that have have office presences, they're still hiring people all over the country and world and stuff like that. So I think it's a behavior change that needs to happen, that people take as much thoroughness to vet candidates regardless of their type of employment remotely as they would in person.
Yeah. And Chelsea, are you seeing when you post positions that are open that you are getting a larger number of candidates applying for positions just in general, and the screening process is more difficult because of that large influx of candidates, especially with the higher unemployment rates?
I think we haven't had a tremendous amount of jobs open during this time. So there's been a smaller amount of jobs open. And I would say comparably, the amount of applicants is about the same. I think the opportunity for us is now we've expanded beyond the DMV area. So we've been able to look in other parts of the country, whereas before we might have restricted the candidate pool to just this area because they would have been on site. So we're expanding and evolving our thought process on, hey, let's capitalize. Things are going really well. Our clients and customers are very happy with the work being done remotely. How can we continue this? Even if that's some sort of hybrid post-COVID where, some of the team is on site and some is remotely, we're trying to identify how do we benefit from this, right? It's a giant case study.
Yeah.
Sense. But as far as the process for interviewing, all of our interviews have been done virtually, and I think it's streamlined it again, so it's not taking as long. Our employees aren't having to leave their client work to come do the interview, so it's cutting back the time spent on interviews, setting up that virtual interview. I think the challenge is if there's multiple interviewers, just making sure that the timing and coordination is on point. That's been like the one sticking point that we've had to come on the other side of. So, but as far as the interviews, a lot of our technical code reviews, our interviewers have used GitHub or other platforms and environments to check the code review. So that was a fairly easy transition as well. So I know our recruiting team is happy, and given that it takes a little bit of time, despite everyone's calendars being filled with Zoom meetings, there's a little bit more flexibility from some of our executives or leaders who are typically off-site, where now if they're off-site, they can still do that 30-minute hour interview with the candidate.
Yeah. I know in talking with some clients and other things, the thing that I've urged is really using those screener questions too on the applicant tracking systems, because for certain more general positions where they have gotten a huge response, they haven't used those. And so trying to put those screener questions in has helped them kind of narrow down their applicant pool. Of course, they've got to be good screener questions and apply to the position, but that will definitely help on the front end to get the candidates that really fit the position. So have you made any accommodations to candidates for virtual interviews in this process? Greg, have you found that you've had to make any accommodations?
Yeah, I mean, I would say all our interviews are remote. So yeah, you could say that's, but I mean, again, it just goes back to finding ways to get a little deeper in an interview in a Zoom meeting versus in person. There's a lot of things that are lost, even though you're looking at somebody like we are right now. There's a lot of things that are lost, or even when you join a Zoom meeting, you're kind of on, and it's that time when you first meet someone or when they walk into the office, or some of those little things. It's helpful to see someone a little more natural and not on, so to speak, and it also helps for them to see the interviewer in that way as well. So, and just to see that, okay, we're real people, and we stub our toes on the way to walk over to the chair or whatever, and stuff like that. So yeah, so that's it's tough. I think we're all kind of learning our way around doing that, but the idea of the icebreaker at the beginning of the conversation takes on a new importance, I guess.
Right. And kind of like Ximena said, like just feeling the culture of the workplace, right? Trying to get people to come back in and interview, right, Ximena? Getting a feel for coworkers and leadership.
Absolutely. Our space represents the culture of who we are. And if you walk into one of where the engineers sit, there are flags of more than 20 countries, because our company is very diverse. And for especially candidates that are immigrants, that speaks volumes of the place, and that can make it be a decision between going to another tech company and us coming to us. So we designed the space. I mean, I literally went, bought furniture, put it on U-Hauls, and brought it into the space. And this is a space for fits about 120 people. So that gives you an idea of how invested I was in the space. So now we don't have that. So we have to show them that visually, or we have to show them why is that important to us, how the culture is represented. So that's where you gotta be very creative on trying to show that. But we do have some remote workers who at some point told us that they felt disconnected from the company, that they said somebody actually wrote on Glassdoor and said that it was higher, and then people will start a meeting and not pay attention if he was listening, if he could hear. Sometimes he will see the camera off. Sometimes, I think one time he wanted to talk and people were so loud that they couldn't hear him. So that gave us a lot of clues into that. At the time, we were not doing everything right for remote workers, and now I think every company in America, I mean probably the world, that uses a hybrid or had to send team members home to work at home, we all elevated our game, and we're all doing that better in every possible way, because we're all actually now suffering from not hearing, or from being part of a not as great experience. So I think that eventually we're all gonna come off much better out of this in using all the tools that we have to onboard and to communicate with staff.
Yeah. Well, and as we've got about a little over 10 minutes left, so I'm gonna move into our last area, which is paid time off, sick leave, benefits, and childcare. And to start that out, Chelsea, how do you think, or how should we have with employees using paid time off versus sick leave around some of the issues that they're facing with the pandemic? What's some insight that you have with that in terms of your experience over the last few months?
So I think that was a concern of a lot of employees in the beginning, especially when childcare centers and schools started closing. Everyone was like, how am I going to balance all of this? And so we've made sure employees know that, and supervisors take a very flexible approach with employees. So if employees need to be off for a chunk of the day and have those hours later in the evening, then to accommodate to the best of the team's ability to do that, to allow that flexibility. And then when the Family First Coronavirus Response Act came out with the guidelines for the dependent care leave and paid FMLA, we took that and enhanced it a little bit. So we looked at, okay, well, what is a part of this act, and how can we make sure our employees are supported to that next level or two up? So we did implement 2 weeks of dependent leave as well. So employees were able to have leave separate from their vacation or sick leave, so they didn't exhaust that if they needed to spend time with their family members, if they were experiencing coronavirus symptoms or any sort of medical related issues, or their school or childcare was closed. There was that bucket of leave that employees were able to use in addition to then the FMLA that then was paid as well. And then as far as if they've exhausted all of that, again, flexibility is first, and then we've also encouraged and have different arrangements. So if employees need to go part-time status or adjust their hours, so maybe their week looks a little bit different than other coworkers, we've worked with employees on that to make sure they're able to do that, because we know it's a difficult time for everyone and we're all in it together. And so if we can be flexible and support employees, we'd much rather do that than them leave the company.
Yeah. Have you had to look at anything like sabbaticals or leaves of absence or anything like that?
We haven't. We've been fortunate that employees have been able to create the flexible schedules that they've needed, but we're open to leave of absences. So if employees have or would come to us and say, hey, I just need this month off, we would work with them for that. So absolutely, that's an option on the table.
Yeah. How about you, Greg? Have you had any areas where you've had to deal with looking at flexible uses around PTO or sick leave?
I think not so much on that, but I do think related is just how people, their work schedule during the day, right? So, and I think I touched on this a little bit already, but just, there's parents with kids that have, they're in Zoom meetings all day as well. So that's probably a topic for another webinar, but so they need to take care of the school for their kids, or they need to, pick kids up from childcare or whatever the case may be. So just in addition to just the fact that, us, like most larger companies too, everybody's in a different time zone. So we're dealing with that. And on top of that, we also just want to make sure that even if you're in Seattle and you don't have to work 9 to 5, we expect work to get done, and everybody's got expectations of them. But it doesn't matter to me. There's certain meetings that we need everyone to attend, but outside of that, if you need to take 2 hours in the middle of the day because some needs arise, just being really flexible about that. And that goes to trusting employees to be able to do the right thing and stuff. But it also comes to just setting clear expectations. And so, if the manager knows what's expected, again, does it really matter if they do it at 8 p.m. or 2 p.m. in the afternoon? From my perspective, as long as things get done on time, I'd much rather be flexible with people and have them feel like we're really supporting them when maybe things will settle down soon enough and things get back to some sense of normal. But until then, as long as the work gets done, it really doesn't matter how or when.
It kind of boils down to good communication and management, right? Having good communication with your staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can add one quick thing, so now that open enrollment is right around the corner, it's gonna be a great opportunity to we're revising all of our benefits. And I remember 3 years ago we were doing fertility treatments. Then we didn't have a lot of usage for it, so we changed that to give other types of other benefits. We have a lot of different types of benefits that for different things, but the view on PTO today from team members may be very different than it was last year. And so what do they value more? I remember we did a survey last year and says above salary they value time off. So more PTO time, it was better for them. But this year, when I talk to team members, that may change. So I think this is a really good opportunity to have maybe, those conversations with team members and say, what do you value more now after the pandemic in terms of benefits?
I think that's one of the items just to add to that is we did increase our rollover this year since many employees are unable to go on any family vacations or take time off. We upped our rollover amount an additional 40 hours, so employees won't lose those PTO hours for 2021.
Excellent point.
And Kim, in the panel, I want to make sure that we save at least a few minutes for a question here. It seems like we addressed a handful of the questions that came in, but one of the questions I thought was relevant to kind of what we had just been discussing was around performance reviews and employee performance in general and level setting expectations. So we may have time for just one question. So if anyone would be able to speak to that, I think the audience would want to know about that.
Sure, I can chime in on that. We just finished one of our performance review cycles. And again, I think it's not apples to apples being virtual instead of face-to-face, but providing employees the resources, specifically the supervisors, to set expectations with employees on what their role is. We have competencies and we have level set the competencies by each level within the organization. So employees know if they're meeting expectations below or above. And that resource in particular has been very helpful for supervisors, particularly newer supervisors who sometimes find those conversations to be difficult. But if you have things level set, general enough where roles can fit within those competencies, then it provides a guide and base for the supervisor's conversation with that employee. So clear expectations. We have also implemented the supervisors are required to identify an area of development, and that doesn't have to be that they're not meeting that, but what are those stretch opportunities and how can the firm help your career grow in those areas? So we are growth focused and we want to make sure that supervisors and the firm are helping employees get there. So no employee in this virtual environment feels like they're stuck within this role forever.
Yeah.
And then one other question was actually similar to that. It was around promotions and ensuring career mobility. So I'm not sure if you want to kind of continue on to that or, any insights on that.
Sure. We just finished our promotion cycle in September as well. This was the first year we did 2 times a year we have promotions. And our process is we have a governance process where the supervisor submits the nomination and creates a business case. And so we have promotion criteria outlined specifically for each level. And the supervisor then provides the 360 feedback that they've received and the business case to the governance panel, and the panel reviews all of the nomination cases. So it coincides with our September performance cycle, but it is separate in the sense that employees and supervisors work on that nomination form together to create the transparency and trust. And then if an employee is not promoted, then the panel provides the areas of growth that they would like to see before that next promotion cycle begins in January.
Great. I think we're coming right up on time here. So we were able to get to some of the questions, but I want to thank our amazing panel, our wonderful moderator, and all those who participated. If you have any questions, feel free to contact Arlington Economic Development. We'd be more than happy to work with you going forward. But again, I want to thank everyone for joining in. Again, our wonderful staff, panelists, and moderator. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.